What's up, Michael? How are you doing?
Happy birthday, Jack Siney.
Hey, brother. Thank you so much.
Hope you had a great week, bro.
Did turn 53 a Saturday over the weekend. Took a little trip down to Galveston, Texas. And so, I don't know. B plus maybe? I don't know. I wouldn't put Galveston on your must, but we had a great time. My son, grandson, daughter-in-law all came down and played in the Gulf of Mexico. Amazing. Feel old. Have my Minion shirt out, so I figured I'd rep it today. My happy birthday shirt. So appreciate that. It was a great, great weekend. Love to see my family. It's why we're in Texas. Had to come. You go where the grandkids are. So that's where at this stage in life, you're like, where are they? That's where we're going. So had a great, great birthday with a bunch of pop gifts. So that's
where. There you go, pop.
That was it. So welcome to the show. Appreciate everybody. How's everybody doing? The 180 Way Show. Look at this popping off logo. We had the people designing, got a mic in there. We're now a real show, got a logo. We're going to recreate an intro like we had in the old days with the GovCast. So it's all coming together. So appreciate you joining us today. Mike, you want to tell people who you are?
Mike Denker. I am the coach at Same Team Selling. My wife Angel is the trainer. And she trains the salespeople on how to get more out of their effort and close more sales quicker and get out of bad sales faster. And I coach the managers so that they reinforce those skills and get more return on their investment in the training.
Amen. Same Team Selling is amazing. You can see it behind Mike's head. They have a book out there and all kind of stuff happening Same Team Selling wise. And so highly recommend them. And simply, I always forget, but I want to get this in. I want to thank our sponsor, i.help. If you are not familiar with i.help, amazing platform. It is the platform of the future. Go to i.help and see what they do is they aggregate all of your online stuff, all of it. Literally everything you have, you put online is all now in one place. So you can literally put all your web conferencing, all your online scheduling, anything and everything you want to, like all your websites, podcasts, your social media stuff. You can just send people to i.help. Whatever /Jack or You're the Man or Mike Denker, or you can have a URL attached to i.help. But for $5 a month, they will literally aggregate all of your stuff. Amazing. So cannot recommend i.help enough. Go get your i.help account. It'll be one of those things I promise you a year from now, you'll be like, oh, I should have got my URL way back then. And then you'll have to add D, whatever in front of your thing like you do with URLs today. So don't do that. Go get your i.help account. Amazing. $5, best investment you will make. Highly recommend that. Thank them so much for sponsoring the big show. Yes. God bless. Crazy. As we endeavor to be one of the top 1 million LinkedIn lives on the LinkedIn platform. Hey, so per the 180 Way concept, we have spent the last couple of weeks talking through the 180 Way framework. And so the first section of those, couple of things are really about realizations that are happening out there. Like, hey, you got to go opposite. You have a foundation of faith. Work hard, play hard doesn't work. You better be comfortable being uncomfortable. So there's all concepts into just realize what's happening in big time success that really don't get talked about a lot. Like a lot of people are like, you need to work hard, but they don't talk about getting to the top. There's some bumps on the road, right? There just are. And that's what stops a lot of people. And so we spend a lot of time just kind of going through those and talking about what happens in the private time so that you're successful. What happens? Do you have the fortitude and foundation of that? And so Mike, anything you want to add on that on the first section of the?
I was just listening to you, Jack, and I'm reminded of my dad when I was a kid, right? We didn't have GPS, we didn't have map apps, we didn't have apps, but he used to call AAA and he would order a map. He would say, and the first thing they would say is he would say, I need a map to Nashville, Tennessee. And first thing they would say is, where are you now? From where? Because you can't make an accurate map to where you're going unless you know where you're starting from. And I think today's show is all about starting, like, where are we really right now? And have I got what I need to take this trip?
Yeah, and that's really the first section of the 180 Way, that framework is to like make sure, do you have the foundational principles to be successful? And so once we talk about those and share those, and we have a whole kind of workshop to do that, this next phase are about really personalization. So what does that really mean? It's like digging in on your own life and what's happened to you and what's important to you, and how do you take the concepts and apply it to you? And really, which is step 5. And this first step is like taking inventory and then taking accountability. So this is old school, like recovery. If you've come out of the recovery world, this kind of like take a fearless moral inventory of your life is incredibly powerful. I put out on social media this week, painful. Like when I went in the recovery world, people were like, you're going to have to do an inventory of all the things that happened to you. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I put all those things away. They're in a box. I put them up in the closet. I do not want to revisit them. And so the recovery world has mastered this because they know, right? I haven't put out this thing. They know that if you do not deal with your past, if you do not process it and unearth the things that have affected you, they will continue to affect you in your present and going forward. And so I love, Wayne Dyer's huge motivational guy out there, obviously life coach, and love that the things that have happened to us, if we don't go back and kind of reassess them from a neutral perspective, they're bound to affect us. And that's one of the reasons addiction is so prevalent in our society, right? Those things stay with us, right?
It's rest in peace, Wayne Dyer. But what's really interesting is that he got his start. He's one of those guys we talked about last week that he wrote a book and nobody believed in his concepts and the things he was trying to preach in his books. And so he had to go from bookstore to bookstore with a trunk full of books, right? And convince the bookstore owners and managers to put his books on the shelf. Yeah. And he'd say, hey, I'll stay and talk about my book if you want me to. And he drove around the country with a trunk full of his books. And the other thing that's so important about what Wayne Dyer says is that we all drive around wherever we go with things in our trunk.
Wow.
And it's interesting that we've got to make room. There's important things for our trip ahead that we need to have with us, right? We've got to pack well, but we've also got to make room. There's some things that are in there that are going to hold us back, right? There's like some of our cars literally have anchors hanging out the back that drag the ground behind them as we're trying to drive through life. And we've got to be honest about what's in the trunk that needs to get out so that we can make room for the stuff that's really going to help us travel well.
Amen. Look, we have this visual we'll get to later, but this thing from the past holding us down is such a great visual. Before we jump to that, though, I really want to dig in a little bit what we're talking about here because I think it's so important. And so it really is this thing, like, hey, taking a personal inventory of my life, of your life. That's really what we're talking about. Like really going through your life events, whether you're 22, 32, 55, 62, and what are the major events that have impacted you? You don't have to go through every event, but sometimes, it's interesting. We see in the psychology world, in the recovery world, two people could grow up in the exact same house, have the exact same family experiences, and those events affect them differently, right? Just because you're in the same house with the same environment does not mean you have the same effect. And so this is deeply personal to you to be like, oh, here are the things at my age that stick with me about the past, right? And that's really the first step with no judgment on them. It's like brainstorming. It's not like this was good and this was bad, but as you spend some time, some quiet time being like, oh, this affected me. I remember this greatly, blah, blah, blah. Good, bad, indifferent. It really starts there because again, like Wayne Dyer said, if you don't start to kind of process and make peace with and know what those things are, they're going to continue to come back. I don't care how far you stuff them, think they're put away, you felt you dealt with them, you talked about it with a friend when you were 8, it's there, it's lingering until you as a grown adult, kind of work through them, list them and acknowledge them. It's extraordinarily powerful. And again, full disclosure, myself did not want to do any of that. So sometimes it's not peaceful, especially the ones that hurt, the ones that cause a knot in your stomach, right?
Well, you put it away. We've all taken those events and we put them in a box somewhere. We put them away, and we think they're away, but they're not. Right? They're just hurting us. They're holding us back. They're anchors to our future. And the thing that's so important, I think, that people realize is that there's usually a person associated with that event. There's somebody we're blaming. There's somebody we're mad at. There's somebody we have a grudge with. Yeah. And if you don't do that personal inventory, you don't realize that there's some people you think you like right now that are in your life, and you're like, you've been carrying a grudge for 30 years against that person. So there's a guy in our community, he's really smart. He's a genius when it comes to family and in human relationships. And his name is Dr. Bob Barnes.
Oh yeah, it's
He,
great.
he teaches this thing about driving around the bus, right? He says, you're a bus driver. You're driving around the bus and you're driving downtown and you're driving through your life. And then he says, as he's got the big bus wheel in his hands, he goes, that's your grudge bus. He goes, now adjust the mirror, right? Look up in the mirror. And when you look back in the back of that grudge bus, who's sitting there? He goes, first of all, I want you to realize that everybody sitting on your grudge bus, not one of those people realizes they're even on your grudge bus. They probably don't even care that they're on your grudge bus. It's only hurting you. You're walking around these grudges. And he goes, listen, stop the bus at the next stop, reach over and grab that thing, and reach over and open the door and tell everybody to get off the bus because they're hurting you. Not them. They're not hurting you, but the grudges that you're carrying, the unresolved unforgiveness, this resentment, this angst, this anger. If you keep dragging them around on your grudge bus, it's hurting you. And it's interesting. Angel and I read a devotion today, and it was so great. She said that when I forgive someone, I'm not saying they were right.
Yeah.
I'm just letting myself be free, right? And so, and the other thing I heard was, unforgiveness is when you drink poison and expect somebody else to get sick or die. And it just doesn't work that way. You're just going to get sick from the poison. And so it's so important that part of our assessment, our self-evaluation is that we analyze the events that really affected and basically they made us who we are. But then we have to also be honest and true about the people that are associated with those events. And are we holding grudges or anger or resentment or unforgiveness? We've got to walk that out as well.
Yeah, we had this image of these things can seem so long ago and can seem almost unforgivable and can seem overwhelming. And the challenge is that left unprocessed, left kind of unforgiven, unworked through, it gets really daunting. And that's the core reason for almost all addiction stuff. It's like we're all a product, all of us, but we're ingrained by 16 or 17. Our core foundations, the things that happen to us, like we are almost rock solid, our core foundation by 16 or 17. So it's those events that affected us. And then what we do, the ones we don't like for most people, they drink them away or drug them away or stay busy or whatever it is, so they don't have to deal with them. They stuff them down and then they pop up in an argument, in an event in life, something happens to your company, something happens to your kid, you stuffed it, I got it, and then something happens, you're like, whew, and it all comes out. And so that's really the key of trying to go through when you're in a good place, literally the foundational events, like doing a personal inventory of the things that affected you, no matter how far back they go or potentially how painful they can be. It doesn't matter. It's just putting them down on paper. It's just finding a way in a neutral setting, wherever your safe place is, wherever you have good time, you're able to think in quiet, like, hey, these things. And Les Brown says this thing when he does goal setting, right? He's like, don't think about how you're going to get to the goals, but what are all your goals? And don't ever think about how to get, don't start to tie how you get there to your goals. The same thing applies to this exercise of like, hey, doing your personal inventory, don't worry about how you'd resolve it or how you work through it or what would happen. It's just listing them and go, hey, these things affected me. Good, bad, neutral. They're just memorable and they impacted who I am today. And then we can talk about this next step of some of the accountability. But that exercise, I promise you, will be extraordinarily eye-opening and emotional sometimes, right? If you're honest, you have to be at a good place. Like, don't do it when you're already going through some other life strife, right? But when you're in a solid place, knowing, analyzing, and looking on a sheet of paper, hey, these are the things that made me who I am today for good, bad, or indifferent, right?
And it's so right, Jack, what you said is that tunnel, like a lot of us aren't dreaming big, right? Because we get wrapped up on how am I going to make that happen? And so we dream smaller or we don't dream at all. And because we think it's too far to get there. Well, the same thing in that can be applied to our past, that we don't address the things that need to be addressed because we think they're too far gone.
Yeah.
Right. We think there's a term, past the point of no return. And listen, it's just not true. That's a lie you just have to decide it's time to turn around, right? It's time to address that and just take the first step. I mean, that's something that you and I talk about all the time, is that we have what we need to take the first step, and don't skip the first step because you're afraid of the fourth step. We don't even know what the fourth step looks like yet. Just take the first step in the new direction.
Right. This thing that we're putting in the 180 way of doing inventory, again, is proven in so many other parts of life. Again, people can be reluctant. I don't want to go relive that, but cannot encourage you enough. Go make a personal inventory of the things that have affected you and let it sit. You know what I mean? It's not a 1 hour exercise. You're like, oh, I'm going to do that. And I encourage you to give yourself a week or so. Sometimes in recovery world, it can go on for like a month. Like, these are all the things that got me. I got to walk away. I want to come back. Some emotional, some are great. You get to relive some great moments. And so once that's done, right, you have this list, whether it's on your computer or on a piece of paper or however you do it, right? Then the next thing is this accountability piece. And so this, in type A, type motivational stuff, are always like, you got to be accountable. You have to take accountability. Well, we're not really talking about that yet. Like, there's a time and a place for that. That's really looking at your life events and going like, hey, what is your role in those events? Because too often we want to displace blame. We want to, as you mentioned, Mike, there's a person. We want to blame the other person. We want to blame the circumstances. And that is fair. So in full disclosure here, let me just do this. I just want to say for everybody watching, if you were the victim of abuse, something happened to you as a young person, some bad things happen, those are not your fault. That's not your accountability. And so those things are clearly inappropriate and off the rails. And probably there's some professional counseling associated with those to help you process those, right? So outside of those things, they're real, we're not really talking about those, right? We're not talking about the deeply things that are one-sided, wound you, completely inappropriate. But outside of those, everything else that we're talking about, we have a role in. We have some accountability in. What was our mindset at the time? What was our role? And so just going through those events and looking at that, again, it's just so powerful, because we have a tendency as human beings to want to deflect. You're like, well, that event happened. That was Aunt Mary's fault. I don't like Aunt Mary. Screw her. And you just put that in a box and you put it away. And it just comes back constantly over and over. So how do you do accountability? Looking in the mirror is the true power in this exercise.
And it's when you allow Aunt Mary to keep affecting your life, you're allowing Aunt Mary to have power to hurt you in your life, in your future. And you can stop that. Like, that's what we're accountable for. We're not accountable for what Aunt Mary did. We're just accountable for how we decide to move on from it. Yes. I can't change it. It happened. It is a fact in my history, but I really do have a choice in how it affects the rest of my life. And sometimes I just don't want to let that person that hurt me keep hurting me. Yes. Right. I want to say, listen, what am I? And they're not going to help me. Right. They might be dead. Right. And so, like, they're not going to help me. But I can help myself by deciding I'm gonna put this in a proper perspective. I'm gonna put this in a proper place where I can move away from it. And you don't have to take it with you. You just have to put it. You have to properly manage it. Yes. You can't pretend it never happened, because that's that ditch of doom that you leave in your backyard that you got to dig it up.
There's these guys, the skit guys. So there's these two guys that do kind of things that happen in your life and they act it out. So it's a two-man troupe. And they have this one, it's so powerful. I've seen it hundreds of times. One of the guys has all this luggage on, right? A backpack and luggage and a shoulder. It's all this stuff. And the other guy's like, what are you doing? He's like, why are you carrying all that around? And, as the interaction goes, each bag represents something that happened to them. Oh, this is when I failed out of school, and this is when my boyfriend broke up with me, or my girlfriend, and this is when my dad died, and this is when I got hurt here, and I didn't get a promotion. And there were all the life events that affected him. And it was just so visual when you see this person with 20 bags, and, in the interaction, it's like, you can put those down, and slowly in the skit, you see the guy let go of some of those things. And it's just so powerful because we are holding on. We're all human. We're all wired basically the same way, right? And we have a tendency to just hold on to those things. And again, we hear about in a success, oh, you got to be your own CEO. True, but it really is this, it's like taking full responsibility of your life. Everything that's happening in your lives has something to do with our previous actions, which led to a conclusion. So it's like, hey, even some of the dramatic people are like, even if you got COVID, that's your fault because you blah, 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 it can be taken to extreme. But it's like, hey, what is your role in the process so that you have an inventory? You talk about your role and like, do I want to repeat it? Was it a good thing? Oh, let me do more of this. Or hey, how do I not go down this road again? And you literally zip it up, put it in a box because you talked about it, you addressed it, you processed it, you talked about your accountability, and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to let that affect me anymore. I feel it, I got it, and so, and the last part of that can be sharing that with somebody, so they can kind of process it with you, and you kind of get it out and you say it. Can be amazingly powerful because if not, again, people stuff it and it comes back 100%.
It's really cool that the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Romans, and in that letter he tells them about this race that's ahead of them. He says, hey, there's this great race ahead of you. And I really think that's what we're talking about. He's talking about, the future. There's a race ahead of you. And he says, but before you take that race, you've got to throw off the weights and the sins that so easily ensnare you. And that's what I thought of when you talked about the 2-man troop that had all this luggage. It's so interesting. Like sometimes the command is you think like, I've got to undo and I've got to, you just think there's a whole process to get rid of the luggage. I love the words, just throw off the stuff that's holding you back. Just throw it off and let it not have hold of you anymore. Because quite frankly, some of us have become, the junk we're carrying around becomes part of our identity. And we've got to be willing to get a new identity that doesn't include the junk, because when your junk is part of your identity, odds are you've got a victim identity as opposed to a victorious identity. You're saying that I am how I am because that did, if you had to live what I lived, you'd be like I am. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But
sorry, that's one of my personal pet peeves when people are like, you just don't understand because you don't know. And I just want to say, listen, for the audience, anyone watching this replay, listen, everyone has a story. Like everybody has a half a dozen things. Like, so that to live and hold on to that, you just don't understand. You didn't walk in my shoes. You don't know how bad it was. It's that all those are true statements. Just like some of the racial cultural biases. Sometimes there's a kernel of truth, but then it's exploded. That's the same thing. It's like it is true. No one's walked your footsteps. No one lived what you lived when you were a certain age. They weren't there in that moment. But everybody has that. Everybody has a set of stuff. And so as Mike just said, we can walk around as victims and be like, well, you just don't understand. Or let's go through and work through the process so we actually put it to bed, because everybody has a story of crap. Everyone has a crap box and a success box, God willing. But the crap box is the one that affects us typically way more.
Yeah. And there's so many cliches around this topic, but they're cliches because they're mostly true, right? And one of them is that the things that happen to us either they can make us bitter or they can make us better. And really it's not easy, but you've got to make that choice to start the journey. You got to say, no, I'm going to figure out how this makes me better. And I'm just going to start walking in that direction. Or I'm going to decide that, nope, this makes me bitter. And I'm just going to figure out how to get more bitter. And that's a choice we make early. Like you said early on, Jack, all of this is so important to realize that this isn't a 2-step process. This isn't, I decided to make 1 step in the right direction and 2 steps later, I'm done. This is the rest of your life. But you're talking about determining the trajectory. Am I trajectory towards bitter, or is my trajectory towards better? And then we we start walking out the 180 way the rest of the journey.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard life is 10% what's happened to us and 90% of how we internalize it, right? And we put this up earlier, but this thing right here, this guilt, this shame, this can be so powerful, unbelievably in our subconscious what we do. And I'll just, again, for me, I want to say lovingly to anybody watching this, or for now or going forward, like this right here is a lie from the devil, literally from the pit of hell. That thing trying to hold you down. Because I'll just say this: when you're able to do an inventory, kind of walk through your accountability, and then the ability to say it out loud, to share it, I'll just tell you, it is amazing how that feeling of guilt and anger starts to fade away. You verbalizing it and sharing it is amazingly powerful. It's so freeing, because everybody has stuff. I just want to repeat, everybody has stuff. And so when you walk around the world, it's all fake. How you doing? I'm great. How are you doing? Great. I'm good. You good? I'm good. I'm great. You're good. I'm good. I'm good. You great? I'm good. I'm good. You good? Right? And you get deep with very few people, right? You get deep with very, very few people. And so they're wearing a mask. They're all wearing a mask, and they just wear it all day. And then they go home and maybe take it off for their significant other, or if they're living by themselves, maybe a friend, but it's all fake. And so your ability to walk through your life and then say it out loud, it loses its power. All the sting, like, oh yeah, this happened to me as a kid. I feel uncertain when I go to speak publicly. Hey, in this forum, I feel uneasy. You verbalizing that, typically other people become very empathetic. Then they join your cause and like, oh, this is not their sweet spot. How can I help? You will be shocked if you're able to get the words out of your mouth, no matter how choppy it is. It loses all of this guilt, shame, fear. Everybody has stuff. I want to repeat that. Everybody has stuff. And so if you're gutsy or open enough to share it, you will be shocked of how that weight, those bags, start to come off your shoulders.
And my theology says that I'm free from that, right? That Jesus said, no, you don't have to carry guilt with you anymore. I paid for that. I paid that bill. And so the reason I bring that up is because it's so important. When I acknowledge in my self-assessment that I'm feeling guilty about something, I know that that's not from the one I love. It's from the one who hates me. And so that player that, we talk about government things. Is that a good player or a bad player? Well, in my theology, God is good and Satan, the devil, is bad, and he's against me. God is for me, Satan's against me. And in that context, guilt and shame are weapons from my enemy that try to hurt me and hinder me, because if he can't take me out, he can at least put me on the sideline. And I don't want to be on the sideline, and I don't want anybody listening to us right now, Jack, to be on the sideline of life. There's a rich, wonderful, powerful life possibly ahead of us. It's offered to us. It's there for the taking, but there's a lot of lies. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things that are trying to keep us from walking in that direction. And we have to, part of that self-assessment is determining what's true and what's not. And the guilt of your past that you're carrying is one of the lies that you're carrying to hold you back.
So true. Like when we talk about this 180 way life intervention, what we're really talking about is how do you do life different than what you hear about every single day. I believe, Mike said there's a lot of memes or a lot of thought pieces that we these little pithy phrases we hear all the time. The challenge, like, we talked about the other week, like, hey, don't talk about money, politics, or religion. And you're like, yeah, you don't talk about those three? Those are three of the most impactful things in your entire life, along with your health. Those are the four biggest things. If you don't talk about them, you're going to get all sideways, right? And so the 180 way in this world, we are taught all the time, especially if you came from one of those tough families, like, men don't cry. I don't want to hear about that. Get through it. Fake it till you make it. There's all these things that kind of hey, make sure the outside world feels like it's good. But like the reality is, if you don't process it those things that cause you angst and sit in your belly, they're going to keep coming back. Like this thing is so true. It'll just keep coming back. And typically what's painful, what stinks, what's hard, it will show up typically in the worst times. Like when you least want it, the biggest moment of your life, in your marriage, If you don't have great fortitude and have put away truly some of the things that happen to you, will show up at the worst times. And that's what we see all the time in the media, right? We see somebody famous fall like every week. Go watch TMZ. Somebody is on a pedestal, seems like they have it all, just something stupid. And the reason they do something stupid is something they're not foundationally solid. And an event, their weakness showed up, whether that was a person, a substance, an event, some situation, and they implode, right? I said 2 weeks ago, no one gets stressed at 5 o'clock and go, tonight I'm going to jail. It doesn't happen. And why? The people that have the most fall because they have some unresolved things in their past that they're trying to stuff, and it gets painful, and it will come back. And so the 180 way, we're like, hey, let's not stuff them. Let's deal with them. Let's go through it. Let's document them, and let's talk about the accountability so you move on from it. Amen?
Amen. And I think, Jack, if this is a new concept for anybody listening right now, like, listen, take out a piece of paper, right across the top line, the events of my life. And then just start writing them. Just start writing them down. And you'll find that you put the piece of paper down, and 2 days later, you're going to go, ooh, I forgot about, wow, that's been packed away. That must have been 80 levels deep because that was put away. I had one of those experiences a couple weeks ago. Ooh, I totally just had that put away, and it just popped up. And it wasn't a rotten experience, but it was one that, zinged a little bit as it came out. And wow, that was really interesting. That must have been hiding behind a bigger event. Like there must have been a big one that was kind of hiding it. But, getting those things out, when the truth of our past is exposed and we share it with others, we can no longer be influenced or bribed or blackmailed.
Nobody can blackmail me. Right. When you say it out loud, no one can use it against you. Hey, this happened to you. You go, yeah, I told a group of 100 people at a recovery meeting last week.
Listen, we watched President Obama when he wasn't President Obama yet. He had all kinds of things he did that wrecked many a presidential candidacy before. But he had something to say that none of them had ever had before. I wrote it. It's in my book. You can read it for yourself. That the power of your investigation is gone because I already was honest about that. Yeah. And it was such a great episode for all of us to learn from. Don't let your politics or whatever you think you are get clouded. He taught us a fantastic life lesson. You let other people know about the worst things you've done, and they have no more power against your future. He moved from that to become the president of the United States. Anybody else that came 10 years before him, if they wrote down on their list all that stuff, they go, well, I guess I'm never going to be president. He said, I put it in a book. I didn't put it on a list I put it in a book, and therefore it has no power over my future.
Right. If you say it, it loses all of its power. People are trying to hold it against you, the reporters, the world, your boss, coworker. You're like, nope, I already said it. It's all good. It is amazing how freeing that is. And again, I just want to repeat, if you are in the process and looking for help, I mean, that's really the impetus of what we're doing, this life intervention, the 180 way life intervention, to reach out. You didn't get there. We didn't get to a spot overnight. You're not getting out of it overnight, right? Everybody wants to go to the seminar. They want to go to the thing, and they want to, like McDonald's. Hey, I want to fix this in 2 hours. Right? That's just not going to happen. You didn't get here. There's no seminar book you're going to read and go, well, now I've invested 3 hours. I'm better. It's not like that. It is a life intervention of how do you go through it and make it better. And I'll just say in full disclosure, I know for myself, it was a bumpy road, a very choppy childhood with 3 alcoholic parents and addiction rampant throughout my life, my loved ones, and working through that. I'll just say there's light at the end of the tunnel. So whatever you're dealing with, I promise you, you can get through it, because wherever you are, we'll connect you with somebody that's been there. right? That's always in faith. It's like, why am I going through this? It's your ability to reach back, you know what I mean, and say, oh, I've been where you are. I can help you get there. And so it's such a powerful tool because you're a role model once you get through for somebody else that hasn't been there, right? They're like, can I get through this? I just want to, whatever you're going through. In society, Mike and I talk about, there's only about a dozen or 15 things you can go through, right? If somebody's already done that. The devil has the same set of tricks, right? It's the same set of, over and over, same set of tricks. And you're not going through something that somebody else hasn't already been through. I promise you that. There's nothing you're suffering with. You go, I've never heard that. No one's ever dealt with that. It's so untrue. It's the same stuff. And can we be a light as you go through it? That's really the purpose of the 180 Way Life Intervention, to help you process and get to a good place, a healthy place, so you can fulfill, self-actualize your true dreams.
You know, and I think it's important, Jack, that I saw you post the national suicide number last week, and is it 988? I want to say that correctly. 988. I can't promise you that you'll be able to get out of anything alone, and maybe you won't. But I promise you, if you reach out for people that have helped other people, they can help you out too. I promise you they can. There's no such thing as a hopeless case. There's only people that just forget that critical piece, that you may not be able to make it alone. And life is a team sport. It's people talk about a village, a community, but it's a team sport, and you need to reach out to teammates to help you get through the darkest, toughest times of life. You may not be able to do it alone. I promise you'll be able to do it together.
Listen, especially, I just want to say this and we'll wrap the show, especially for men. You know, I'll just, whatever it's worth, I'm biased. I'm obviously a man. Never know in today's culture, but I identify as a man. You know, husbands, fathers, grown men are expected to be soft when they need to be soft, and strong and heroic when they need to be heroic. And it can be, you have to wear this facade and show no weakness and don't cry. And there's a UFC fighter who won this weekend, and he saw that clip, amazing. He's like, listen, one of my best friends in the world committed suicide. He's like, and he just felt like he couldn't cry with me, but now I'm going to go to his funeral and cry. And it's like, listen, we're all human. We all have moments, and we may not show them. We're not saying you have to show it to the whole world. You don't have to be like, get on social media. I mean, people do. You can put it on social media. Some people, social media, they document their whole lives. But it's not saying that. But for you to find a safe group, safe place, safe mentor, safe, as Mike said, who is your community, who's around you, who's on your team. All your friends are not on your team, by the way. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. All your friends, everybody that's with you is not for you. Let's repeat that, amen? Everyone that's with you is not for. Just remember that. It's not true. So who is your safe community so you can literally process and walk through life with? Because being a guy in today's society can be super tough. But you're right, there's a lot of resources and help. And we're going to have down moments, especially with COVID and work from home and all the things, and the economy's about to the toilet. And so just encourage you to not have to be that ultra tough veneer that is in the stereotypical male persona. There's times, right? Somebody's coming to your home, but in the real part of life, we all need a team, and we need somebody to let down our facade and be who we really are.
You know, it's amazing, Jack, that if you think about the heroes that we grew up with, and, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson, like most of the time they were in the movies, they were so awesome and great and overcomers and alone. The Clint Eastwood partners, Dirty Harry's partners always get killed. I mean, he never carries a partner to the next movie, and that's not how life works. That's not how life works. Yeah. Tough and alone is just alone and lonely. And listen, when you're alone, the lions that want to eat and destroy you, they're just looking for doesn't matter if you're big, doesn't matter you're strong. If a pack of lions comes after you and you're outside the crowd, they got you.
Listen, and the pack of lions is women, guys, drugs, sex, alcohol. It's gambling. It's not a lion literally eating you. It's the demon that's inside you that comes to get you, and you wonder how you got there, right?
I can't tell you how many times a friend just said, "That's not a good idea," or really, should we rethink this on somebody? And you're like, and a lot of times you talk them into doing the stupid thing with you. But how many times are we living a great life now because we listen to each other, right? We talk to each other, at least out of some of the stupidity of our youth was left undone. And maybe that's why we're alive today. Just, one or two bad choices makes the difference of having a tomorrow. And having people around you that are helping you make good, you know who they are. You know who's helping you make stupid choices. And you know who, maybe you don't spend much time with them, but you know that these are the people that would help you make better decisions. You need to you need to decide to spend more time with the folks that are helping you make better decisions.
Amen. Amen. Listen, today's thing, again, as we talk about from kind of realizations in the 180 way of like, these are some real world things that people don't talk about a lot. Now we're moving to the phase 2, which are like, what are personalizations? How does it affect you? And be able to do a personal inventory of the things that affect you. And then working through that list, once it's complete, of the accountability piece. Like, who is accountable? What is your accountability? Not in a trying to place blame, but hey, what did I do? There's clearly other options. And then last piece, being able to share that in a safe place so that it gets processed. It loses all of its power. When you say it out loud, someone can't blackmail you down the road, can't make you feel guilty about it. This thing right here, this guilt, shame, whatever it is, it starts to loosen, not overnight, but slowly by slowly, and you get healthier and more confident. And when that's done, when your foundation is strong, man, the world's your oyster. It is literally like, oh, you can't. Oh yeah, that happened. You can't touch me with that. Cannot touch me. And you know what? That did happen. And it was not my best moment. And I moved on. And I'm not that person from 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That sucks. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. That's not who I am today. That, when you're able to say that with no, with that little like weird feeling, when you could say that carefree, ooh, you made progress and you're on the path.
Yep.
Amen. Cool. Any last things, Michael? Anything else you want to wrap as we wrap the show? Anything you want to say?
I'm just thinking about the term lone wolf. It looks really cool on the back of a leather jacket, but in nature where wolves really exist, lone wolf means dead wolf.
Ooh,
so make sure you're running with a good pack.
Our friend Chip posted something online. I just saw it today with the zebras and then the lion chasing a zebra. I'll find that image. It's so good. Listen, before we go, just to remind you, I want to just thank our sponsor, i.help. Go get your i.help account, $5 a month, best $5. People always say, don't get a cup of coffee and then go buy this. No, get your cup of coffee. You deserve it. It's great. It's probably $7 now with inflation, but go get your coffee and go get your i.help account. And I think the first month or two is free. Go get your i.help account. It aggregates all of your online stuff. Amazing. Thank you to i.help. And so we'll be back next week with step 6 along the way in the 180 way. And so appreciate everyone's time and energy. We will see you next Wednesday. Let's go. God bless. Stay safe. Woo!